Morning, and welcome to the Museum of the San Ramon Valley's virtual speaker series. I'm Dan Dunn, the director of the museum. Last month, we visited the Moraga Adobe with historian Kent Long. Today, Steve Lane and Paul Ingraham of the San Ramon Valley Branch Railroad Group will tell us the story of the San Ramon Branch Line that provided a lifeline of transportation and commerce to the valley in the early 20th century. This program takes us back in time to the communities, businesses, and individuals that were connected by this historic railroad. Even better, you can visit the museum and see a working N-scale model railroad of this historic line and travel in scale from Concord to San Ramon. Please use the chat window at the bottom of the screen for any questions that you have. Feel free to send in questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll address them at the end. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce and welcome in Steve and Paul. Guys?
Good morning, everyone. This is Steve Lane.
And this is Paul Ingraham.
And it's a pleasure and honor to be presenting our presentation to you, as well as the model railroad exhibit here at the Museum of the San Ramon Valley, which is the former Danville Depot of the San Ramon Branch Line. So now, without further ado, we would like to go ahead and tell you more about this line.
Was a local railroad serving central Contra Costa County from 1891 to 1978. The San Ramon Valley Branch initially extended from Avon south to San Ramon, and in 1909 was extended to a location the SP called Radom in today's Pleasanton. There was a clamor for a local railroad by the ranchers of Contra Costa beginning in 1865, when a study showed a local railroad would be profitable. Several railroads, often only paper railroads, were proposed. The line through Niles Canyon and over Altamont Pass was built through Pleasanton in 1869. A line from Martinez to Tracy passed through Avon in 1878. Southern Pacific agreed to build the branch if all the right-of-way was donated by the local populace. This was done by donation of land and subscription for financial support by September 1890, and in October, the SP signed the contract to build the San Ramon branch. Construction proceeded rapidly during the winter by concentrating work in areas where the rainy weather was not detrimental. On February 14th, the construction train reached Walnut Creek, and on June 7th, the first passenger train traveled down the entire branch to San Ramon. The railroad was finished. Soon, mail service was switched to the train, the 4 depots were completed, and in 1909, the line was extended to Radom. By 1927, the depot in San Ramon was closed and removed as highway vehicles displaced local train travel. In 1934, passenger service ended, and in 1978, all service ended and the tracks were removed. The branch was mostly a straight line south, with a few modest curves and bridges over the local creeks. The grade was also barely detectable, starting at 12 feet above sea level at Avon and increasing gradually to 462 feet at San Ramon, the high point, and then drifting lower to 365 feet at Radom. The valley was known as a hay and wheat growing area, supporting the many horses in use in San Francisco. With the development of trucks and cars, the call for feed and silage for horses fell off, and the ranchers of the county turned to tree crops on the valley floor and cattle ranching on the hillsides, particularly on the east side of the valley. Numerous other crops were also tried in the rich soils of the valley. However, there were certain staple products that needed to be shipped in from other areas, including lumber, ice, coal, and plaster sand. In the summer, cattle were often taken to rich mountain grazing grounds in the Sierra and western Nevada, and then loaded into stock cars and brought back to our valley for their winter pasturing. In later years, as the ranches were subdivided and sold for new homes, building supplies became an important inbound product, along with automobiles. During World War II, gravel from the quarry in Pleasanton was transported to local strategic military sites. The most common line-side buildings in the early days were the many hay and grain warehouses, where baled hay would be stored at relatively inexpensive locations until called for by customers in San Francisco. To serve as a local office to handle the business generated on the branch, 4 nearly identical depots were built. All were built to the SP's standard number 18 plan, and all exhibited a style that paralleled their growing importance as the center for activity in each town. They initially differed only in the side of the track on which they were built, and thus the side of the depot where the agent's office was located. Walnut Creek and San Ramon were on the west side of the tracks, and Concord and Danville on the east. Each had a second-floor apartment for the agent and his family to occupy. Non-standard depots were built at Avon and Alamo. A signal tower was erected at Radom, where the Western Pacific tracks crossed both legs of the Southern Pacific Y junction there. The San Ramon Valley branch was built with relatively lightweight rail, so only smaller steam locomotives were permitted on the line. These were often 440 American and 260 Mogul locomotives and 280 consolidations for heavy consists. For a number of years in the period we model, the SP assigned an unusual-looking McKean rail cart to handle passenger, mail, and express needs on the line. In 1907, the Southern Pacific was concerned about the vulnerability of its line between Sacramento and San Francisco. It relied on trains traveling from Sacramento to Benicia and then being loaded onto the ferry Solano and crossing the Carquinez Strait to Port Costa, where the trains would be offloaded from the ferry to continue on its way to Oakland, where passengers transferred to a second ferry to San Francisco. One alternative the SP considered was a line down the east side of the Sacramento River to Antioch, then along the Makoko line to Avon, where it would turn onto the San Ramon Valley branch to Pleasanton to join the line through Niles Canyon, cross the new Dumbarton Bridge, and continue up the peninsula to San Francisco. The SP never used this route, and in 1914, they purchased a second ferry, the Contra Costa, and in 1930, completed the railroad bridge across the Sacramento River between Martinez and Benicia. The Southern Pacific San Ramon Valley branch was not the only railroad serving central Contra Costa. Starting in 1911, an electric interurban railroad, the Oakland and Antioch, renamed the Oakland, Antioch, and Eastern, and finally the Sacramento Northern, the SN, was built that ultimately connected Oakland with Chico, then the longest interurban railroad in the country. As an electric interurban, the SN could efficiently make numerous quick stops and had a number of flag stops in addition to more substantial depots in Walnut Creek and Concord. In the left photo, the steam locomotive is on the San Ramon Valley branch headed south, awaiting an all-clear signal from the brakeman before crossing the Sacramento Northern tracks, just visible in the lower right corner. The track curving to the left is the interchange track where freight cars could be exchanged between the two railroads. The SP called this spot Septimus, while the SN called it Las Juntas. This is about where the Pleasant Hill BART station now sits. From 1914 to 1924, the OA&E operated a branch from Saranac between Walnut Creek and Lafayette to Danville, and which then hooked east to end at Diablo. Local residents often called it the Toonerville Trolley, a reference to a cartoon of the day by Fontaine Fox. But over time, things change, as did the nature of life in our county. As trucks and cars replaced horses, there was no longer a need for hay and oats, so many ranchers switched to tree crops, especially pears, grapes, cherries, walnuts, and almonds. As transportation and commuter options grew, farmland was sold for the development, and building supplies were freighted in to build the burgeoning subdivisions. During World War II, troops were moved by train, including movements from Camp Parks in Dublin to Camp Stoneman in Pittsburgh. At night, 60-car gravel trains delivered Pleasanton gravel to Port Chicago and Travis Air Force Base. Now we invite you to climb aboard for a town-by-town tour of the railroad as we show you both what was there and how we've modeled it. In 1891, Avon was chosen as the junction point at the north end of the San Ramon Valley branch. Located on Southern Pacific's Makoko line, named for the Mountain Copper Company that runs between Martinez and Tracy, Avon is 38.1 railroad miles from San Francisco and 4.4 miles north of Concord. Avon's first station was a Southern Pacific Standard Design No. 1 depot installed in 1878. It stood until 1901, when it was replaced by this smaller telegraph office. Unlike the original depot, the new structure did not provide living quarters for the station master's family, though some sources say that the agent's family did reside in the building. A freight platform and a cattle corral with a loading ramp were also provided at Avon to serve the local agricultural customers. In 1922, a large freight section was added to the telegraph office. The depot may have been enlarged to better serve the refineries and the town of Pacheco built nearby in this era. The depot may have remained in service into the 1960s, and the color photo shows the structure still standing in the 1970s. The railroad still exists in Avon and provides active rail service to the refineries in the area. The right-of-way of the east leg of the Y junction can still be plainly seen, though the track has been lifted. The west leg is still in place and serves the Marathon refinery and other businesses on the only remaining active piece of the San Ramon Valley branch. The model of the Avon junction uses existing generic modular sections that allow the trains to be operated in a prototypic manner. Trains can be assembled in the yard, and engines can be turned around on the Y, just as they were on the real branch line. The scenery and structures, which are removable, were built to replicate the actual scene at Avon as it was around 1920. After leaving Avon heading south, the first major town is Concord at milepost 42.5. The Southern Pacific built a standard number 18 depot here in 1891. The depot was originally painted in the scheme then in use, two-tone gray siding with a red roof. In the 1905-06 period, Southern Pacific changed its depot colors to the more recognizable colonial yellow with depot brown trim and moss green roof, the color scheme used for all the depots on the branch line. This Southern Pacific plat map of the Concord Depot grounds was used to locate the buildings on the model railroad. Below is a color rendition by Steve Lane showing all the structures from the Sanborn insurance maps and the SP plat map. Starting at the left, the north end, is Concord Avenue, next to a fenced field with the track foreman's house, a bunkhouse for the track gang, and an outhouse. Next is the Union Ice Company. This building is now incorporated into a nearby home in Concord. Moving south, we have the hay warehouse of the Mount Diablo Commercial Company, and across the tracks on the west side is a two-chute corral. Between the main line and the passing siding is a 50,000-gallon water tank, the only obvious source of water for steam locomotives on the branch. Just south of the corral was a stable, handy for the cowboys bringing herds of cattle to and from grazing areas on the slopes of Mount Diablo. Across the tracks from the depot was a small park with the 2 palm trees and a double outhouse. South of the depot was a lumber yard, and then 3 buildings owned by Rossi and Soner: a flour mill and a grain warehouse, a coal and ice distributor, and a hay warehouse. The modern portion ends at Galindo Creek. Located at milepost 45.1 and an elevation of 66 feet, Hookston was named for the Hook family, who donated land for the railroad's right-of-way and funds to build a siding to serve the Hook warehouse, the buildings of the California Wine Association, a fruit shed, scales, a loading platform, and other buildings. The depot was this simple shelter shed with a platform. Eventually, as its need declined, the station was removed, becoming a flag stop. Our modeled rendition of Hookston uses Paul Ingraham's reworked 90-degree corners with added spur tracks and includes the California Wine Association buildings and the Hook warehouse and related loading platforms. The first train arrived in Walnut Creek at milepost 48.2 in June of 1891, and the depot was built in the fall. This is the earliest known photo of the depot, probably taken in the early 1890s. The depot is still in the original paint scheme of gray with gray trim and red painted roof. Just north of what was early day Walnut Creek, but is now well within city limits, was the second bridge crossing Walnut Creek. The original 1891 bridge was a wooden truss. This was replaced by a metal bridge in 1905, and in turn replaced by a heavier steel truss bridge in 1929. The 1929 bridge still stands on the Iron Horse Trail just south of Ignacio Valley Road. This is the 1912 Southern Pacific diagram of the Walnut Creek Station site. The tracks were forced into an S-shaped curve to follow the creek bed on the west and to avoid a large hill on the east. At the north were 2 warehouses owned by Spencer and Eyre and a small Union Ice house. The depot is in the center at the confluence of Walnut Creek and San Ramon Creek. At the south was the Spencer and Eyre lumber yard and small office. Here is a southbound mixed train at Walnut Creek Station. Freight cars are up front with the locomotive out of view. At the rear are railroad post office, baggage, and coach passenger cars. A refrigerator car stands at the station's loading platform. Walnut Creek Station with many milk cans. These are often seen in depot photos, and milk was probably shipped daily. On the right is the hand-pumped well at the Walnut Creek Station. In the background, note the cable reels. Perhaps this photo was taken during the electrification of Walnut Creek in 1910. With the advent of automobiles, passenger traffic declined, and dedicated steam passenger trains were no longer justified. A gasoline-powered McKean rail car stops at the Walnut Creek Station. South of the depot was the Spencer and Eyre lumber yard and office. Lumber is being unloaded from a freight car on the left. The upper map is a combination of the 1912 Southern Pacific Plat diagram and a 1915 Sanborn fire insurance map. The lower diagram shows the model of the Walnut Creek Station area. A narrow width of the portable model railroad modules could not accommodate the S-curve tracks or the creeks. On the right is an annotated photo of the combined Walnut Creek modules.
Here we will make a brief stop and switch train crew positions before departing Walnut Creek. All to advance. You have to use them. And now we'll continue southward to the San Ramon Valley. Next town, Alamo. Early pioneers John and Mary Ann Jones first visited Alamo in 1847 en route to San Jose from Missouri. In 1851, they returned to Alamo to purchase, settle, and farm their land. John was appointed the first postmaster of the San Ramon Valley at Alamo in 1852, and later became a well-respected farmer, community leader, and Contra Costa County government official. At this time, Alamo was the only post office between Martinez and San Jose, and Alamo remains the longest continually operating post office in the San Ramon Valley. After Martinez, Alamo is the second oldest community in Contra Costa County. From the 1850s through 1890s, Alamo's population increased substantially, as did cattle ranching and farming in the area. Familiar names such as Hemi, Bollinger, and Stone established large cattle ranches, hay and grain fields, fruit and nut orchards, and vineyards in the lowlands and valley hillsides. These agricultural goods were transported to market via horse-drawn wagons on poor dirt roads, continually affected by the weather. August Hemi was a German immigrant and an Alamo and Danville landowner and innovator who came to California via New York in 1849 in search of gold in the Feather River area. He arrived in Alamo in 1852 and became a successful cattle rancher and eventually met and married his wife, Minerva. In 1880, Minerva purchased over 2,000 acres of Alamo property, where the Hemis built the family estate and ranched and farmed their land, employing new and innovative techniques for crop irrigation and for fruit shipment to England, using August's own designed refrigerated shipping crates. In 1890, August Hemi met with former acquaintance Collis P. Huntington of the Southern Pacific Railroad to seek Huntington's support for supporting and building a branch line to serve the San Ramon Valley. This meeting went well, as did Hemi's efforts, along with those of his fellow railroad committee members, in securing the required land and right-of-way through the San Ramon Valley for the Southern Pacific to build the branch line upon. In May 1891, while the branch line was under construction, the Hemis had this parcel map drawn of their 2,000-acre property named Hemi Rancho, which included the proposed route of the branch line through his property, highlighted in orange on the map. Grading for the railroad skipped Alamo during March and April of 1891 due to rain and flooding. The line was completed through Alamo by late May of 1891. The Hemi freight station structure, as well as large wooden warehouse, were constructed on Hemi donated land at milepost 52.6. Pears, among other agricultural goods and passengers, were transported via this station. The Hemi station was eventually renamed Alamo after August Hemi's death in 1904. Quite possibly, without August Hemi, the San Ramon Valley branch line may have never been built. The Alamo Station, Hemi Warehouse, branch main line, and siding tracks all appear in the Upper Alamo 1912 Southern Pacific plat map. The lower rendering is of our compressed 2-foot-long modeled Alamo, including the site's 2 trackside structures and a spur track. Next stop, Danville. In 1857, Daniel Inman and brother Andrew returned from the California gold fields to farmstead the fields of the San Ramon Valley. Daniel purchased 400 acres of land from a valley pioneer man named Pigmore. Daniel was active in developing a downtown district along the west bank of the San Ramon Creek, naming the main street serving this district Front Street. A post office was soon established on Front Street, but needed a name. Inmanville was suggested by the community to Inman's dislike, and eventually Danville was agreed upon both after his first name and after his brother's mother-in-law's hometown, Danville, Kentucky, pleasing all. In addition to the Danville post office, the Danville market was established. An Odd Fellows Hall was built previously. And a blacksmith shop and livery served the community, as well as a new Grange Hall. The Danville Grange and Hall were established from 1872 to 1873 on Front Street and became a most important organization and social center for the greater San Ramon Valley community for years to come. The San Ramon Valley Grangers were a formidable group in full support of bringing a railroad to the valley. Like Alamo, Danville's population increased significantly from the 1850s through the 1890s, growing it into a modest, mostly agricultural community of farms and ranches, expanding well beyond its Front Street downtown district. Cattle and sheep were raised, and hay, grain, barley, and fruit and nut trees were grown and harvested for wagon shipment to markets beyond the valley. With the coming of the railroad in 1891, John Hartz, also a German immigrant, donated 6.5 acres of the eastern portion of his ranch property for the railroad and depot area, and subdivided his remaining property east of the railroad tracks for development closer to the railroad area, migrating the town's business activity from Front Street to the newly developed Hartz, Prospect, and Railroad Avenue areas. This combined 1912 Southern Pacific plat map and 1917 Sanborn Company fire insurance map illustrates the addition of the huge hay, grain, and lumber warehouses built alongside the railroad tracks north and south of bisecting Prospect Avenue about 25 years after the previous map's date. Additional important structures on the new Railroad Avenue included Groom's Blacksmith Shop at Railroad and Prospect Avenue and the Danville Hotel and Danville Machine Works. There was also a Southern Pacific livestock corral located north of the depot. In addition to parcel, railroad, and Sanborn Company fire insurance maps, historic Google Earth aerial images are a great resource for historical and modeling research. This image shows the two major warehouse complexes built to the north and south of Prospect Avenue, respectively. It also shows the original built location of the depot, identified by the blue dot, at 800 feet south of its present-day location, where the Lenardi's supermarket is located today. This low-altitude aerial photo looking northwest has been annotated to indicate the Southern Pacific Depot and railroad line in relation to the town streets we are familiar with today. The depot at its original location at milepost 54.3 is highlighted in colonial yellow. The red line is the branch line running north and south. Linda Mesa and Prospect Avenues in daylight orange run east and west. Railroad and Hartz Avenues in lime green run north and south. At the lower left is the county road, today's Danville Boulevard, which crossed the railroad tracks at a diagonal. The Front Street area is at the lower right of the image and to the east. Here's an annotated Louis L. Stein image of early Danville, circa 1914. looking east from the Tassajara Hills. From left to right are the Danville Hotel at its second location, the Flournoy Warehouse buildings, the Southern Pacific Depot, Danville Machine Works, and the John Hart's property in the foreground. And now to ground level, to the railroad area north of Prospect Avenue where these photos were taken. Upper photos are of the Weister, Danville Hay and Grain and Lumber Company warehouses. Lower left is Prospect Avenue looking east with Groom's Blacksmith to the right. And lower right is Groom's Blacksmith shop, paint shop, and livery at Prospect and Railroad Avenues. The depot image on the left was likely taken in the early 1890s, shortly after the branch line opened. It shows a 4 or more car passenger train with numerous passengers and onlookers about. The image on the right, taken some years later, reveals a much quieter scene, near or at the end of passenger service in the 1930s. This is a nice track level Lewis L. Stein image looking north up the branch main line with the Flournoy Warehouse Complex on the left and the depot to the right and one lone boxcar on the depot siding track. Here are a couple scenes of the Flournoy Warehouse Complex, which have been modeled. The image on the left is of the planing mill building with milled lumber and proud workers in front. The image on the right, looking north, includes several workmen, a couple of dogs, and the complex of Flournoy warehouses and outbuildings beyond. Two contrasting early businesses on Railroad Avenue. On the left is the Danville Hotel, which accommodated rail travelers and railroad men. On the right is the Danville Machine Works and Garage, which accommodated motor vehicle repairs. Ironically, passenger cars, passenger buses, and less expensive truck transport all contributed to the decline of the branch line services. The upper diagram is a more simplified and drawn to scale version of the combined 1912 Southern Pacific Railroad plat map and 1917 Sanborn map seen previously. Below is a rendered plan of our 4 Danville Model Railroad sections, consisting of 2 3-foot modules north of Prospect Avenue, the sections that bump out, and the 2 4-foot modules south of Prospect Avenue, creating a combined 4-module length of 14 feet. That's nearly half an actual mile in N scale at 1 to 160 proportion. Note the similarities of scale in the track arrangement and of the building sizes and their footprint locations, all modeled as closely as possible to the original. Here's our model of the Weister Danville Hay, Grain, and Lumber Warehouse area north of Prospect Avenue, looking northwest. And of the Flournoy Warehouses and Depot area south of Prospect Avenue, looking northwest. The upper photo is a portion of the aerial photo seen previously, and the lower photo is a black and white photo of the model with our modeling criteria in the left column. A goal achieved, history recreated and modeled in N scale, in color, and in 3 dimension for public display. These 2 modules earned group member Pete Birdsong a National Model Railroad Association certificate for prototype realistic modeling. And now to our final destinations on our San Ramon Valley branch line tour. Osage and Ramona Park. Much of the area between Danville and San Ramon was purchased by Robert Baldwin and William Meese, fellow 49ers who settled in the valley. Baldwin's area became known as Osage, named for the trees Baldwin planted. The Meese Ranch was in today's Greenbrook area. Ramona Park was once a public recreational feature on the Meese property. The sugar beet dump was located at Osage near Baldwin's Ranch and was used until about 1906. This slide shows the Osage 1912 Southern Pacific plat map above, and below a rendering of our compressed Osage model plan and model photo, including Ramona Park, the Sugar Beet Dump, and the Greenbrook Bridge over San Ramon Creek. The depot area of San Ramon was located at milepost 57.8 on the east side of the valley, over a half mile from the small village. Of the 4 primary depots on the line, San Ramon was the only one that never attracted much of a business community, having only 4 warehouses built on the extensive grounds. However, due to a good supply of well water on the Bishop Ranch, it became the largest Bartlett pear orchard in the world. This ranch also produced walnuts along with hay, grain, sheep, and hogs, and had an extensive herd of Black Angus cattle. Lack of business requiring a station agent led to the closing and removal of the San Ramon Depot in 1927, being replaced by a small flag stop structure. Because San Ramon was the end of the branch until the extension to Pleasanton in 1909, an engine house and turntable were built at San Ramon, as seen in the lower left. The upper drawing is the San Ramon 1912 Southern Pacific plat map, and below is a rendering of our compressed, modeled version. The modeled Bishop Brothers warehouse is at lower right. And with that, we have come to the end of our town-by-town journey. Now we will look at what is left of the San Ramon Valley branch line. So what is left? The paved Iron Horse Regional Trail, which follows much of the branch line's route, is a well-used link to the past. 3 of the line's 4 bridges remain, including the relocated Greenbrook Bridge. 2 of the 4 original depots remain, including the Danville Depot, which has been lovingly restored and is open to the public as the Museum of the San Ramon Valley. Here are images of the 3 remaining bridges from left to right. The former railroad and current Iron Horse Trail Bridge at Monument Boulevard in Concord. The former railroad and current Iron Horse Trail Bridge over Walnut Creek, near Ignacia Valley Road in Walnut Creek. And the Greenbrook Bridge on display at the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento. Here are a couple images of the 2 remaining depots in Walnut Creek and in Danville. Near the Hookston Station site on the Iron Horse Trail, one can find this historical marker with some written history and early images of the area. In Alamo, at the corner of Danville Boulevard and Hemi Avenue, and alongside the Iron Horse Trail, near the actual location of the Hemi Alamo Station, is Hemi Station Park, with a shelter structure built similar to the station. The park also has a steam locomotive play structure and an informational signage display about August Hemi and the branch line. At the former San Ramon Depot site, you will find this nice bronze plaque describing the history of the site with images of the depot and turntable. And if you travel north of there, you will find a large depression in the soil believed to be the site of the railroad turntable. Sources used for our model and for this presentation include our single most important reference, the San Ramon branch line of the Southern Pacific by Irma M. Dotson, illustrated by Charles Endom. Historic Sandbar Company fire insurance maps of the towns along the line are our second most important source, especially for modeling structures. Regional railroad specific books, including Danville Branch of the Oakland, Antioch, and Eastern Railway, also by Irma M. Dotson and illustrated by Charles Endom. The Southern Pacific's Western Division by John Signor, and Northern California Railroads by Fred Matthews, among others, which include photos, maps, and information on our modeled locale, are all useful sources. Regional history books with branch line information we have used include a booklet about the Walnut Creek Depot by Dick Murdoch and a book about each of the standard Southern Pacific Line depots by Henry Bender Jr. The Arcadian series of local history books are useful, as well as Footprints in the Soil, published by the Museum of the San Ramon Valley. Websites, including the Contra Costa County Historical Society with a photo search database, is a continual source for us. The East Bay Hills Project website contains many interesting subjects related to Bay Area transportation and development, with unsurpassed Sacramento Northern information, photos, and an excellent town-by-town series on the Iron Horse Trail and the abandoned San Ramon branch line in the Rails to Trails section. And of course, the Museum of the San Ramon Valley website has great information and photos about the San Ramon Valley and branch line. And speaking of the Museum of the San Ramon Valley, this is where you can see in person how we put it all together. All the major towns, interesting sites, track plans, buildings, and scenes as presented on our 1914 to 1924 era San Ramon Valley Branch Portable Operating and Scale Model Railroad exhibit. The exhibit will be on display in the former Danville Depot's freight room through December 30th and is a part of the museum's current exhibit, Holidays in the Valley. Holidays come in all sizes. The museum is open 6 days a week and is closed on Mondays. Please visit the museum website for more information and for their open days and hours. Here are some photos of the current model layout display at the museum. If you cannot make it to the museum this holiday season to see our layout in person, you can go to YouTube and watch a video recorded by TSG Multimedia of our layout tour from our showing at the Concord Museum last November 2022 through March of this year. Please visit TSG Multimedia's Trains page on YouTube to find it. You can also visit our San Ramon Valley Branch Line Layout Group website to see more photos and learn more about our portable sectional layout, and to find out where we might be showing or speaking about it in the future. We have many people to thank for their help, hard work, and interest in our project, as seen here. And that means we have reached the end of our presentation. Thanks for your interest and for joining us this morning. And happy holiday wishes from our group to all of you. In our remaining time, we would be happy to answer any questions from our viewers.
Well done, guys. Great presentation. The photographs and the diagrams are spectacular, and lead me to actually one of the questions. When you go down and look at the layout that you have constructed, it is a very detailed, very accurate description of the San Ramon branch line. What was your motivation for doing this project?
Well, there are 5 of us working on this layout. Each of us has a slightly different reason for joining the group. For the most part, all 5 of us are interested in local history, and we're all members of the National Model Railroad Association and welcome the chance to work with each other as good modelers and the camaraderie and challenges that we would face in this project.
Okay. You took us from Avon to San Ramon. How long would that trip have taken in full scale?
Well, in full scale, according to one of our timetables, one of the earlier ones, the trip would take about 45 to 50 minutes from Avon to San Ramon, and that would be the passenger train. The mixed train would be a little bit longer, having to stop at the industries along the way.
Okay. I don't know if you've got an answer for this one, but this came in a question about the Nut House, which apparently is now, or apparently was at the location of the Lesher Center for the Arts, and whether that was part of the branch line itself or possibly a spur line. Any thoughts?
My understanding is the Nut House was along the Sacramento Northern route, which is today's California Avenue, correct?
Okay.
And my understanding too is that the nut, what was referred to the Nut House, it was a nut packing facility of walnuts that were shipped out by rail, and that there's actually a plaque at the building across the street from the Lesher Center that talks about that site.
Okay. Another question that I've always wondered about, all of the depot buildings have a sideboard at both ends that reflect the distance from San Francisco. But the branch line didn't go to San Francisco. So why was San Francisco chosen as a descriptive point on these end boards?
Ah, yes. On the Southern Pacific, all the distances from everywhere were measured from the ferry building at #1 Market Street in San Francisco. And all trains were considered eastbound when they were going away from San Francisco and westbound heading towards San Francisco, regardless of the actual direction that they were traveling. And anybody who lives over on the peninsula, where I do, may notice that a number of towns there, El Camino Real, the addresses are given as east and west, even though that highway is mainly north and south. And that's because they picked up that same idea from the Southern Pacific.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's it for the questions that we had come in. However, I've got to let you know that there were a number of comments about what a great presentation this was and how well you researched the program today. So, Steve and Paul, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank everybody for viewing this morning. And we had some questions about this. Where can we see this again? If you missed any of our earlier programs, you can find them by visiting the museum's website at museumsrv.org. Today's program, the one you're asking about, will appear early next week. Join us next time on Thursday, January the 18th, next year at 11:30. Local historian and author Steve Minier, in collaboration with the Alameda County Sheriff's Archive. Steve, you might remember for doing great programs for us on Camp Parks and Highway 21. Well, he's also meticulously collected photographs and information from across Alameda County about the Alameda County Sheriff's Office and their history. He will unveil previously unseen images and recount forgotten stories that have shaped the Alameda County Sheriff's Department and the communities that it serves. So that's next year, January 18th, 11:30. Thank you guys for the plug of the museum and what it's currently showing. And here you go again. The museum is currently showing that wonderful layout that we've been looking at today in N scale of the branch line. And it's also, museum is also decked out for the holidays. So pay us a visit, stop and look at the exhibition, view the exhibits, shop in the museum store for unique gifts. And if you like these programs and want them to continue, we ask that you make a donation by going to the museum's homepage, museumsrv.org, and clicking on the Donate Now button. We are also in need of volunteers. If you can give us some time, please contact the museum. I hope you've enjoyed today's presentation. And on behalf of the museum, Steve, Paul, everybody here, I hope that you have happy holidays and a safe and healthy 2024. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.